Hello, everyone. This is Brian Lewis of the Spin Zone, and we're talking about the Washington Wizards here as far as the next reiteration of the NBA offseason review as we head closer and closer to the NBA season. We're in August right now. We're itching closer to October. And one of the things you notice with the Wizards, they have quite a few guys that were veteran players that their stocks have fallen completely and are just not really valuable. So they traded Kyle Kuzma at the trade deadline this past year. Now, keep in mind, let's trace back a little bit for the Wizards the same way we did with the Jazz and the same way we did with the Hornets, right? Similar to the Hornets, where they were sort of competitive with Kemba Walker. The Utah had Gordon Hayward, Donovan Mitchell, Rudy Gobert, Paul Millsap, etc. And all those guys like periodically left. Millsap went to Denver, Hayward went to Boston. That was very controversial. Mitchell left, Gobert left at the same time. Danny Ainge is now the GM. Now let's look at the Wizards. John Wall, Bradley Beal, Otto Porter were all on max contracts. Otto Porter might have had single-handedly been the most overpaid player in the NBA outside of Timothy Mozgov for a couple of seasons there in Luol Deng. That contract was really bad. But they had no choice but to max out Porter at that time because, mind you, Beal and Wall were just so good you couldn't say no to those guys. You had Marcin Gortat on the inside. You had Kelly Oubre on the bench. And speaking of that, the Wizards probably would have been in the conference finals had it not been for another Kelly, last name Olynyk, that's still in the NBA, as is Oubre. And Olynyk just went off that game seven. I mean, he had probably the best game of his career. Hit a couple big threes in that fourth quarter. I remember him and Isaiah Thomas just that was a fun Celtics team from a Celtics fan perspective, but for the Wizards, that was about as good as it's gotten since the 90s, really, honestly. And sad because John Wall had all those injuries. Bradley Beal just turned into like basketball's version of Anthony Rendon. And passive aggressively, like you look at all the moves the Wizards have made. Now, they ended up getting with Jordan Poole and Kyle Kuzma, and they were able to offload both of those guys while accumulating. Now, keep in mind, look at these young assets that they have. So, the veterans that they have right now, CJ McCollum, that they got in that trade for Jordan Poole to get out, and Chris Middleton, who was part of that swap to take back for Kyle Kuzma. Now, Chris Middleton and McCollum may both be out the door, or they both be there. I don't know. But I'll tell you what, with the way that the league is, where you have to spend to the cap floor, and these are veteran guys, even if you keep them half the season, even if you keep them for this year, and then they're unrestricted free agents, like you just ride it out. I mean, Middleton at $33 million a year, that was a worthy contract. He was one of the most underrated players in the NBA when he got that contract. So I'm not even really all that concerned about it. But this is the rest of the Wizards roster that I have a lot of love for this Wizards roster. Um, and part of the guys include Corey Kispert, Alex Sarr, Tre Johnson, Bilal Coulibaly, Malachi Branham, Bub Carrington, Will Riley, A.J. Johnson, Kaishan George. That's a decent core already. And then you add Will Riley to that. You had Cam Whitmore in a trade with the Houston Rockets, where you still have him under a rookie contract for 2 more years. Alex Sarr was a number one pick. He may not be like, the greatest player in the world, but he can definitely be something. And keep in mind, like, he's a power forward. So stretch four in a league that doesn't have a lot of stretch fours, you were able to get a player in a bad draft that fits a position that is kind of not really existent in the NBA. It's going to be hard to defend him down the stretch for years to come. And of course, like you look at the Wizards, they brought in Tre Johnson. So Tre Johnson was a player that I thought the Philadelphia 76ers could have taken at number 3 overall. And I would have had no issue with it. Now, I love VJ Edgecombe. As I said in the Philadelphia video, you can check that out. Edgecombe's more of like an aggressive slasher type of player as opposed to um, Tre, where Tre's kind of like one of those kind of guards where you just kind of look at the numbers and you kind of see, okay, this guy knows how to put the ball in the basket. Now, keep in mind, he's from Dallas originally. He went to prep school in Missouri, and then he was the 5th overall recruit in that class as well. Now, keep in mind, these are the numbers that Tre Johnson had as a freshman. As good as VJ Edgecombe was at Baylor, where he was a little restricted, he averaged 20 points a game, 3 rebounds, 2.7 assists. But he also was efficient from it. He averaged 30. He played 35 minutes a night basically. He was a 40% 3-point shooter, 87% from the free throw line, and then shot 42.5% from the rest of the field. So the dude's an efficient player. If he could transition that to the NBA, I think he's a shoe-in to be, at least at the very least, like a very prominent role player. Like his floor, being a 6'6" shooting guard, could very well be, like, I mean, you could throw, I mean, people say, oh, Jaylen Brown. But Jaylen Brown was, like, much more of, like, a pure athletic specimen. He wasn't, like, as nurtured of a scorer as this guy. I think for Tre, like, follow along the trajectory of, like, a Jim Jackson, a Steve Smith. Like, if he could become, like, a Steve Smith, I think that's the best thing for his career. Steve Smith was a freaking baller. That was one of the first guys I remember watching in the NBA. Joe Johnson is another one that I think I rave about all the time. I love Joe Johnson. Paul Pierce at 6'6", good comparison. That's a good career. If he has a Paul Pierce type of career, the Wizards are in a shoe-in for a guy that makes like 6-7 All-Star games. So I think for the Wizards, him, Sarr, Coulibaly, that's a good core. And then you put yourself in position with those veterans leaving to secure a big free agent, much like Houston did. Houston and OKC are absolutely a better formula than what Boston did. I think what Boston did was they had 2 young stars for about 5 years already, Brown and Tatum. They had Horford that was already there for 5 years. What they needed was a consistent point guard that didn't leave or was traded by the team. Keep in mind, look at the Celtics point guard instability at that point, and that's a whole different topic for another episode. I think for the Wizards, what it comes down to is just continuing to build with these young guys. I would personally ride out McCollum and Middleton till the trade deadline and then see what kind of assets you can get. Because, again, being able to accumulate, some mid-round picks, you might be able to pull some trades for other players that can get you ahead. And keep in mind, with the way the second apron in this league is going to be, there are going to be teams like OKC, Houston, Dallas, Boston, New York, Philly in the next couple of years that are going to have to make moves. Or for restricted free agents, put yourself in position to land some of those players, if you believe in them, like a Jonathan Kuminga. And that's someone that I think the Wizards should still possibly go after if they feel that trading Coulibaly is worth it. Now, if Kuminga they feel is better, that's great. I personally feel like sticking with this group. Corey Kispert is a good player as well. Sticking with this group and riding it out with these, McCollum and Middleton there, I think that's a good way to go. I don't hate it. And I think for the Wizards, they can make the playoffs in the Eastern Conference because the Celtics are down, Indiana's down. Milwaukee and Philadelphia are still huge question marks. Atlanta is really good, but I still think Atlanta still needs some time to grow. And Miami's a mess. Toronto's a mess. So I think because of that, you already have 6 or 7 teams. You could be in the play-in. And I think because of that, the Wizards actually could have something to build on here. Potentially, they could win 40 to 44 games. And I think that's a big improvement compared to where they were. I'm not saying they're going to make like a Detroit-type leap, but they could. This time last year, I was saying Detroit could be a playoff team, and Detroit made it. And now they're a team that people see as like, are they contenders? And I think that's a good question. The Wizards are still quite a bit away from that, but they could be competitive in a super open Eastern Conference that has more question marks than answers at this point. So I'm excited to see how this is going to work out. But for the Wizards, just have patience. Look at the rest of the league. Houston, OKC, Boston, Detroit, and Orlando. They were all patient, and they reaped the rewards of it. That's the goal for Detroit. And I think that's the goal for Washington here, too. Tre Johnson, Alex Sarr, Bilal Coulibaly, Corey Kispert. That might very well be 4 of their starting 5 guys going into next season. So that's a good thing. Watch out for the Wizards, guys.